and present. I would like to advise everyone that the video and audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to turn off their mobile phones. I remind you that audio recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted. And councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So that brings us to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. I declare the meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Attendance by electronic means. Councillor Blake D'Souza has requested to attend tonight's meeting via electronic means, and in accordance with Regulation 14 capital C and 14 capital C capital A of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, I've authorised Councillor D'Souza to attend the meeting by electronic means. Have we got Councillor D'Souza on the line, folks?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, good. So, Councillor D'Souza, in accordance with Regulation 14 capital C capital A, Sub-Regulation 5 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, can you maintain confidentiality during the meeting and when the meeting goes behind closed doors?
I can.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Items for Council. Agenda items 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.1, 8.2, 9, 11, 13 and 14 will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting to be held on 25 August 2026. That brings us to item 4, which is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. I haven't received any apologies this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, of which there are nil this evening. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared a financial and proximity interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the proposed listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who have contributed to my mayoral re-election campaign in 2023. I've also declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.2 on the basis that I know a number of the members of the Royal Perth Golf Club, and I became a clubhouse member in June 2026. And I've also declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.4 because one of the neighbouring residents is a friend. Councillors, does anyone have any interest that they'd like to declare this evening? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In relation to 10.3.1, I would like to declare an interest as I requested previously before I became a councillor that 49 Forest Street, South Perth be considered for inclusion on the local heritage strategy. And I also have friends who are members of the Royal Perth Golf Club, but I will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Same with 10.3.2. I know members of the Royal Perth Golf Club, but again, I'll consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. And 10.3.3, 10.3.4 and 10.3.5, I declare an interest due to my associations with the South Perth Tree Canopy Advocate and the WA Tree Canopy Advocates, as these all relate to tree matters, but I will consider the matters on their merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. I've also received a declaration from Councillor Stephen Russell on item 10.3.1, which is a financial proximity and impartiality interest on the basis that my property is on the Heritage Survey. Adjacent properties to my property are on the Heritage Survey. I know of persons whose properties are on the Heritage Survey. Councillors, are there any further declarations? Yes, Councillor David.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in respect of item 10.3.1, the Local Heritage Survey, I'd like to declare an impartiality interest as prior to joining council. I made submissions in respect of the Heritage Survey. Nevertheless, I declare that I will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. And then in respect of items 10.3.3, 10.3.4 and 10.3.5, these all relate to local planning policy 3.2 on tree retention, and I note that I am a co-founder of the South Perth Tree Canopy Advocates, and as a consequence there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matters may be affected. Nevertheless, I declare that I will consider those matters on their merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor David. Councillors, any further? Councillor Lees, I see your light's on.
Sorry.
Okay. And Councillor David as well. It's a very pretty colour, I understand. It's cool. Any further declarations, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
None, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right. In that case, we'll move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.3 is deputations. And this evening we have 2 speakers who will each have up to 10 minutes to address council. And as usual, I kindly ask that while everyone's insights and perspectives are valuable and appreciated, I do request that all parties keep their comments concise, to the point, and respectful to city officers and elected members. I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. James Ute, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.3 and against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.4. Welcome to you, Mr. Ute. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your deputations.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Milner, councillors and staff. I feel a bit like a talkback radio caller tonight, calling in for the first time. My name's James Ute, a long-time listener, first-time caller. And per governance and policy, I have to declare that I am a candidate in the special election running for Moresby Ward. I'm speaking tonight on item 10.3.3 first, the effectiveness report into local planning policy 3.2 on tree retention. Firstly, I think there is a lot in the report that is encouraging. Since the policy was introduced, 132 of the regulated trees that have been identified through development applications, 92 of those have been retained. That is a significant number of mature trees retained through the planning process and is an encouraging outcome given it's the policy's first year of full implementation. However, it is important to note as well that the 40 regulated trees that have been removed from properties during development applications, nearly 1 in 3, essentially meaning that 30% loss into those development applications. Importantly, those figures only tell us about the regulated trees and not the substantial trees sitting just below the height, canopy or trunk circumference thresholds that have been lost through redevelopment. One of the questions I think it would be worth council investigating further is the breakdown of those 92 retained trees. How many were proposed for retention from the outset, and how many were retained as the direct result of the operation of the policy and the decision of the city? And I think that would give us, as residents and ratepayers and as a city, a much better indication of how the policy is actually affecting the city's canopy cover. I absolutely recognise that not every tree can or should be retained in development. City of South Perth is an inner urban local government, and we need additional housing and infill, and there are circumstances where the location, condition or the size of the tree means that it can't be retained. But I think this report gives council an opportunity to ask whether the balance in the existing policy can be improved. Under clause 7.2 of the policy, tree damaging activity can be considered where, in the opinion of the city, the redesign of the development to accommodate the regulated tree is unfeasible. I think there is scope to provide greater clarity around that test. What does unfeasible mean? Does it mean that there is no reasonable development that the property could have while retaining the tree, or does it mean that the particular development planned and proposed by the applicant cannot occur in its preferred form? Those produce quite different outcomes. Other local governments are grappling with this same issue, and I'd note that the City of Cockburn has adopted a tree protection policy that provides more explicit guidelines around alternative designs and seeks to prioritise the maintenance of existing tree cover and requires that a reduction to the size of the dwelling, building structure, alternative design and layout, alternative construction methods, materials and or building techniques, and alternative crossover access, driveways and parking area location designs be considered. So while I'm not suggesting that we simply copy the City of Coburn's policy, the City of South Perth has its own planning framework and its own circumstances. I think there is a recommendation within this item 10.3.3 to conduct a full review of the local planning policy, and I would commend Council to investigate that further. So I support Council noting the report tonight, but I'd also encourage Council to consider progressing its review to provide clearer guidance around alternative designs and the circumstances in which removing a healthy, mature tree should be considered necessary. We need to accommodate more homes, but I think we can do that while providing greater protection for all our trees. Do I just move on to my next deputation?
Absolutely.
Easy. So on item 10.3.4, which is the proposed development of 22 Barker Avenue, I'm speaking against the officer recommendation concerning the grouped dwelling, but particularly want to concentrate on the proposed removal of the regulated trees and the replacement planting proposed. There are 3, I believe, potentially 4 regulated trees proposed for removal. One of the most significant is the mature jarrah tree, which is approximately 10 metres high and has an extensive canopy cover, providing habitat for natural fauna. The arborist report identifies that the tree has a high retention value, and the report confirms that both the jarrah and the regulated peppermint tree on the property are in good health otherwise. Neither is being removed because it is unhealthy, and neither has been assessed as posing an imminent safety risk. I recognise that the jarrah in particular poses difficulty in the design and development of the lots that have been approved, but I think, and I don't dismiss those constraints, but this is where I think mature trees need to be given a stronger consideration throughout the planning process and development approvals, with genuine efforts made to design developments around existing trees where reasonably possible. The report from the arborist itself acknowledges that removing these trees will adversely affect neighbourhood amenity, character and sense of place, as well as having a negative consequence on urban heat, air quality, groundwater quality and biodiversity. That is particularly relevant given the city's own urban greening strategy identifies subdivision and development as the key pressures contributing to declining canopy cover on private property. So I think that the removal of a healthy, high retention value jarrah deserves particularly careful consideration in this matter. The report ultimately concludes that the development achieves an appropriate outcome, partly because 3 replacement trees have been planted in lieu of those removed. But that brings me to my second concern, which is the landscaping proposed includes 3 Chinese tallow trees. Chinese tallow is currently included in the City of South Perth's Tree for Your Yard recommendations as a small water-wise tree, and I believe the Water Corp also recommends it as a water-wise plant. However, this species has a concerning environmental history elsewhere. The City of Busselton includes Chinese tallow in its environmental weed guidance, and the New South Wales Government's Weedwise website identifies it as an invasive species that has the capacity to outcompete native vegetation, spreading thousands of seeds via birds into local environments. So I'm not suggesting that the planting here is in any way prohibited, because there is, as I believe the earlier policy mentions in its review, no clear weed or plant guideline for the City of South Perth or the state government. But my question is whether the best species has been chosen as a replacement planting, and when we are approving the removal of such a healthy native tree like the jarrah, whether we should consider alternative replacements. Replacement planting cannot simply replace the canopy that has been taken away, nor the habitat or amenity provided by a mature tree. So if Council is of a mind to approve this application, I would ask that it considers whether the landscaping conditions, I think they're point 7 on the recommendation, could be amended to make sure that the replacement trees are not only water-wise and climate appropriate, but non-invasive, and where practical, provide meaningful habitat and biodiversity for local fauna. More broadly, I think this application illustrates the challenges identified in the preceding effectiveness report. We need additional housing, but we do need to ensure that our development maintains the significant canopy that we do have in the city. So I'd ask Council to give careful consideration to whether further opportunities to either review the plan and maintain the jarrah can be investigated, or if the application is ultimately approved, whether a more appropriate species could be investigated. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr Ute. Would you like to take questions from elected members on your deputation? Councillors, any questions for Mr Ute on his deputation? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Yu. Just with regard to the jarrah tree specifically, obviously a very important food source for the red-tailed and white-tailed cockatoos. Maybe you don't have the information, but have you observed the amount of activity with regard to our endemic cockatoos in that tree at all?
No, I can't personally say that I've noticed it myself, but I do know that one of the proposed trees on the property is used by cockatoos quite a bit, which I believe is being retained on the verge front on Barker Avenue there.
Great, thank you very much.
Any further? Yes, Councillor David.
Good evening, Mr. Yu. Thank you for coming along and thank you for your deputation. In respect of the development in Barker Avenue, I understand your concerns about the development and the fact that the development as planned will affect the retention of trees. The development as planned seems to be for 3 reasonably sized homes with a large number of bedrooms, and perhaps to retain the trees, it might be possible to build smaller homes. Have you got any views about the size of homes, the range of size of homes that we should be offering in the municipality?
Not broad enough on the municipality, but I do think in the situation of 22 Barker Avenue, from all appearances and not seeing any other feasibility reports on there, it seems that the properties proposed on those back 2 lots have been designed to maximise the land space for the house itself, for the footprint of the house, without regard for the tree. I myself live just around the corner in a quite small house. I think it's 72 square metres, so it's 2 metres bigger than technically a granny flat. But I do understand the need for better housing, but to that exact point, I do wonder whether it has been investigated whether a smaller property size could be accommodated on those rear lots while maintaining the planned larger house at the front as well.
Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Denton.
Mr. Yu, I know almost nothing about different tree species, but you clearly do. Rather than have the ones that are currently being proposed, have you got a view as to what should replace them?
I'd love to say I do, but I'm, to my shame, and not an arborist either myself, but I do believe that there would be alternative native trees that would provide greater habitat. With those trees in particular, I do know that they are water-wise, and so I do think that is an important consideration, but I do just note that their environmental impact in other West Australian local councils and other states is significant and I think should be monitored.
Councillor Denton.
Because I'm brand new, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask questions that probably I should know the answer to, but are we able to ask the admin team and perhaps Ms Mullen, in terms of the size of the trees, and maybe there are regulations that deal with it?
We will get to that. So at this stage, we're asking questions of the deputies, but once the deputies have had their say, and then we move on to the substantive items themselves, council will be given opportunities to ask questions of the city administration on each of those items.
I'll save it for admin then. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions, councillors, for Mr. Yu? Nope. Thank you very much for your deputation and for answering those questions. I would now like to invite Ms Heidi Schmidt, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at items 10.3.4 and 10.3.5. Welcome to you, Ms Schmidt. The microphone is yours, and we look forward to your deputation. I might just get you to turn the microphone on, just so we can hear you. There we go.
Sorry.
No, all good.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors and city staff. Councillors, items 10.3.4 and 10.3.5 before you tonight concern 2 multi-dwelling development applications in Como, a suburb already experiencing very low tree canopy cover. Both proposals seek approval to remove mature, regulated canopy trees, 2 on one block, 3 on the other. That's 5 regulated trees that could remain with sensible design. Our city now has a forward-thinking best practice tree policy, Local Planning Policy 3.2, tree retention. Retention means preservation, custody and protection. These 5 trees are significant regulated trees protected under this policy. Some are known foraging trees for the endangered black cockatoos, such as the jarrah that's just been spoken about, and all provide wildlife habitat. They should not be removed simply to provide developers with lower construction costs. The community is asking Council to ensure that the tree retention policy is administered and enforced to protect our dwindling canopy cover, even when developers want completely cleared sites for their convenience and preference. South Perth was once known as a leafy suburb. The government's dashboard on canopy cover reported in 2018, which is very old data, that we had only 12% canopy on privately owned land in Como. So we are no longer a leafy suburb, nor the city at all. The city's made commendable progress recently through its planting programs on public land, despite losses after planting, which is inevitable, and vandalism by some seeking to improve their views. But planting alone cannot replace mature canopy trees that have continued to be removed at a rapid rate. The tree retention policy was adopted to halt the desertification of our 7 suburbs and to protect the amenity trees on privately owned land offer for our whole community. If the City and Council are genuinely committed to increasing canopy cover and applying this policy with integrity, then the position's clear. Every regulated tree that can be retained must be retained, and developers need to be aware of that, design differently, and work around those amazing trees that already exist. This requires a shift in development practice. They must be expected to design around the trees as a matter of course. Across the eastern states, this has been standard practice for decades. It hasn't hindered ongoing development in inner city suburbs at all. It's common practice. It's actually created more livable neighbourhoods, stronger communities and healthier environments for both people and wildlife. And the reason's simple. Trees are essential urban infrastructure, not decorative extras. They cool suburbs, reduce heat stress and lower energy use. They improve air quality, reduce stormwater runoff, which is a council concern, and support biodiversity. They increase property values, enhance streetscapes and make neighbourhoods more desirable. They provide wildlife habitat, shade, beauty and a sense of place, as our suburbs were once leafy. They support mental well-being, physical comfort and community identity. These benefits cannot be replaced by planting small trees after construction. A mature canopy tree represents decades of growth, cooling and habitat. Once removed, those benefits are lost instantly. These facts were validated in a recent article in Perth Now. Quote, "We know that our mature trees provide enormous benefits, reducing urban heat, providing habitats, improving air quality, managing stormwater and making our neighbourhoods more livable. Once these mature trees have been removed, it can take decades for replacement planting to provide the same level of environmental benefits. Data shows it takes approximately 10 to 25 years for a tree to reach maturity and provide significant habitat for wildlife. Retention is now essential. The community has been clear and consistent for years. It wants the tree retention policy applied reliably and with integrity, and we also want it enforced. Administering this policy is part of our council's responsibility to the people who live here. Developers can retain trees. They need to design differently. Developers must retain trees under this policy, and council now has the authority to ensure that they do. Designing around trees is a contemporary, responsible and widely adopted development practice that takes place in other states and all across the world. It produces better outcomes for residents, the environment and the long-term livability of our beautiful city. Perth's Natural Resource Management Review of WA's urban greening strategy states, recognition of green infrastructure as essential public infrastructure alongside roads, power and water, and green infrastructure is essential public infrastructure. We do need more housing, but we also need the canopy benefits that trees provide to our community, our environment and our urban habitat along with that housing. Even Andrew Miller, a director of the Federal AMA, recently stated, connection and healing are to be found among trees. Sensible development can deliver both and must deliver both through tree retention. We now have a workable policy to ensure this. It's been clearly established that trees must be seen on equal footing with traditional infrastructure. Regulated trees are assets, not obstacles. If developers need to work around trees, as they do elsewhere, then so be it. They need to get with the program. The volume of media coverage across Perth reinforces that trees are infrastructure, not decoration or nice to have. Tree retention is a core responsibility of our council, not an optional amenity. These trees are community assets, even though they're on private land. People sell their houses between 5 and 7 years. The decisions that are made for any block are short-term. The benefit of trees belong to all of us, and their protection is part of building a healthier, more resilient and more livable South Perth. For these reasons, I urge Council to vote against the removal of these 5 regulated trees and to uphold the tree retention policy that this community worked so hard to establish over many years of advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Ms Schmidt. Would you like to take questions from the elected members tonight?
Sure.
Councillors, any questions for Ms Schmidt on her deputation? Councillor David.
Thank you, Ms Schmidt, for your excellent deputation. I'll ask a similar question to the one I asked Mr Yude, which is you mentioned in your deputation about designing differently. In the context of the site on Barker Avenue, this would suggest that you design perhaps smaller homes where the tree can be preserved rather than homes that cover the whole of the block. What would it mean to you, or what, in the context of being a resident of the City of South Perth, to have different sized homes than the ones proposed in the plan?
Okay, just scraping in as a baby boomer by a few months. I would be looking at downsizing from my R15 single home, which is quite a large block, soon, in the next probably 5 years. And as you get older, the data shows we don't want great big homes to rattle around in, and we don't want 2-storey homes. It's a new way of life. So the other issue, I guess, is affordable housing is the actual catch cry, not more houses, affordable housing. And the bigger they are, the more expensive they are. So smaller homes, I believe, is the way to go. And on a recent trip to Melbourne, I've actually dug into it a bit and found that there's a movement for taking the block as is, removing the structures and building central courtyards. Because a lot of the trees tend to be right outside the original home's back door, which is in the middle of the block. So they're building around and changing the way people park. So maybe that's the way to go.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Any further questions, councillors?
I have a comment.
We don't
ask questions, do we?
Yep.
I'm going to ask a question.
I should have said this before, that's on me. We do have a couple of new councillors, and we will have a couple of new councillors in September. So when we're doing council agenda briefings, that's our opportunity to hear from the community via deputations, ask questions of the members of the community giving deputations, and then to ask questions of the city administration. We don't make statements until we get to the ordinary council meeting when we get into the debate proper. So it's really, as far as we're concerned as elected members, just questions tonight.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ms Schmidt, have you been and looked at both of these blocks? Are you familiar with them and where the positions of these trees are? Or is it just a general proposition that
I've
you're
seen
putting to us?
probably what you've seen in the agenda. I live in another ward, but I have heard from a few other people in my capacity of running a community group who are very familiar with those blocks, and they're distraught at the loss of the trees, particularly that jarrah.
Yes, but we do need to take in whether or not a different design could be feasible on these blocks, but you're not aware whether that's the case or not.
I'm not an architect.
Okay, good, thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Lees, I thought I saw your hand go up.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your deputation, Ms Smith. I was wondering if you know one of the trees is a liquid amber, whether that is used by the black cockatoos or not as a food source?
Directly behind my house is a liquid amber, and they frequent it. Red tails more than white tails. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Ms Schmidt on her deputation, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
None, Mr Mayor, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much for your deputation, Ms Schmidt.
Thank you.
All right. We now move on to item 10, which is the draft August reports. I'll now hand you over to the Acting Chief Executive Officer, Ms Anita Amprimo, to take us through the balance of the draft August reports. Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.1.1, Draft Public Health Plan 2026 to 2031, final adoption. This report presents the draft City of South Perth Public Health Plan 2026 to 2031 for consideration for final adoption following public advertising.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillors, do we have any questions for the City Administration on this item? Councillor David.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I realise that I'm coming to this very late, coming to the council very late as well, but I am wondering why the impact of heat and the rising of temperatures isn't outlined in the plan as a challenge or a risk. According to a very recent study in the Lancet, the impacts of heat waves on people over the age of 60 have been underestimated, and the City of South Perth has a higher proportion of people aged over 55 than Greater Perth, as outlined in the plan. So it surprises me that there's no reference to the impact of heat and temperature rises and how the city might address that.
Who should I send that to? Ms Mullen? Or Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In preparing the actions for the for the local public health plan, the city is required to have regard to the requirements contained within the state public health plan. And so through that document, they set a series of directions. In formulating the different actions, we then have regard to consultation with the Office of Epidemiology from the Department of Health, and the focus that they've had in terms of the public health outcomes has more been focused towards some of the actions contained within the local public health plan. That was then tested with our public health advisory group, who've also provided feedback throughout that process. So it's not to say that it's not an important consideration, it's just not the focus of this specific local health plan, but it is otherwise captured in the city's urban greening strategy.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Another question, Councillor David?
Yes, thanks very much. I understand that in the state public health plan, there is reference to the special health needs of the Aboriginal population, and that there is an Aboriginal population within the City of South Perth, but they're not specifically addressed in the health plan.
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is something that we could consider as part of this, but when Council considered the plan for advertising, there wasn't any recommended amendments or changes made to that plan. The City does have a reconciliation action plan, which also captures some of those requirements to do with Aboriginal health.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just with regard to the actual plan, it's noted that the mosquito treatment program is envisaged to be rolled out to the broader city. Can you please just give me a bit of an indication, because I know that the Canning River is obviously the predominant area where we have the mosquito treatment and the mosquito issues, but what other parts of the city would be affected, and is the rollout of the program going to be in the next year?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city is required to have a mosquito management plan by the Department of Health. We're part of what's known as the Contiguous Local Authorities Group, which is a group with neighbouring local governments to partner with them to receive funding from the Department of Health for that program. And through that group, we look at potentially problematic areas for mosquito breeding sites and use that funding for treatment. So it's not just the Canning River, particularly up towards the town of Victoria Park on the Swan River and across the islands throughout that area there can be problems. And so again, we just work with the other local governments to deliver treatment. So at the city, we have aerial treatment as part of that plan, which goes towards Salter Point and Waterford, whereas there's hand treatments on the Swan River side.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Ms Shaw. Just a final question with regard to the actual plan. So obviously we've got initiatives with regard to public health and also mental health as well. Do we have any indication as to how many programs we actually run, or are they outsourced programs?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The city is not a provider in terms of those programs itself. However, we partner with different organisations where they have mental health awareness campaigns, or for example, where there's workshops held through our libraries. So again, we're not a direct provider, but we do promote those initiatives and provide opportunities for different organisations to share information in that space.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, any further questions on this item? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just had a question in relation to the use of chemicals that might be potentially harmful, such as glyphosate, and whether that is addressed in this plan or in a other city plan.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's not addressed within this local public health plan. It's probably more of an infrastructure question in terms of the use of that through our parks and reserves, if I can direct through.
Ms Lowe.
The use of any chemicals is done as per the instructions and the safety instructions of the chemicals, and we have notified as per the requirements every time we do it.
Any further questions for the administration on this item this evening, councillors? Councillor Sousa?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. Next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.1.2 RFT 00005, provision of security services. This report recommends council accept a proposal from Allied Security Australia for the provision of security services.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Now, folks, this one's got a confidential attachment, so if anyone has got any questions that relate to that confidential attachment, let me know and we'll deal with that one when we go behind closed doors. Yes, we do? Okay. I'll make a note that we'll do that. Does anyone have any questions that can be asked in open session, or we'll just, I'll make a note of revisiting that one at item 15? No. Councillor Sousa, any open questions on this item?
All good, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, I'm just making myself a note to revisit this at item 15. There we go. Now, we're about to go on to item 10.3.1, Local Heritage Survey Final Adoption, but I've declared a financial and proximity interest in that item, as has Councillor Russell, so if there's any questions on this item, we'll need to leave the room and I'll need to invite Deputy Mayor Councillor Brenda Abrandis to take my chair. Councillors, do we have any questions on this item? Yes, we do. Okay. In that case, I will vacate the chamber along with Councillor Russell. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, if you'd like to take my place as presiding member, and if someone can grab us after this item is done, we'd be grateful. Thank you, and see you shortly.
Okay, thank you. We're at item 10.3.1. I'll ask the CEO to actually read the item.
Thank you, presiding member. Item 10.3.1, Local Heritage Survey Final Adoption. At its meeting held on 28 April 2026, Council supported advertising of proposed changes to the Local Heritage Survey to reflect the outcomes of a place-specific review for several places. This report presents the outcome of advertising and seeks final approval of the amended Local Heritage Survey.
Thank you, Ms Acting CEO. Are there any questions with regard to this item? Yes, thank you. Councillor David.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, the item is about our local heritage survey, and some of the items are proposed to be category 1 or 2 in the survey. Now, at some point in time, it was generally accepted that properties with a classification of 1 or 2 would then form the heritage list. But I understand that the formation of the list has now been divorced from those numerical categories. Could you expand on that, just to explain what happens after this is adopted?
Thank you for the question, Councillor David. If I could pass this one to Director Shaw or Director Mullins, thank you.
Thank you through the chair. So yes, the next step, if this the local heritage survey is adopted this month, is that the heritage list will be updated and brought back before council. So the guidelines for establishing a heritage list, which are published by the Heritage Council, do include guidance on the level of significance of properties that places rather are to be included in the list. Generally, it is recommended that categories 1 and 2 are included, but that is entirely open to council, so that council can make that decision at that time.
Thank you, Ms Mullins. And a further question, Director David?
That's all. Thank you very much.
Councillor David, thank you. Were there any further questions, councillors, with regard to this item? Yeah. Councillor D'Souza, did you have any questions with regard to this item?
No, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. If someone can please ask for the Mayor to return. Thank you.
And I assume we're up to item 10.3.2.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So item 10.3.2, proposed scheme amendment number 3 to local planning scheme number 7, lot 1, Labouchere Road, South Perth, final adoption. The purpose of this report is for council to consider final adoption of the scheme amendment number 3 to local planning scheme number 7 to zone lot 1, Labouchere Road, South Perth to private community purposes.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any questions for the City Administration on this item? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that one of the objections talked in great deal about the tree issue, but my understanding is there are no regulated trees on the property. But can you confirm that if this proceeds, that the tree retention LPP would apply to the land?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you through the chair. So this scheme amendment only relates to the clubhouse, and there are no regulated trees in relation to that particular site. Had there been, yes, the policy would apply, but there are no trees impacted whatsoever in relation to this scheme amendment. Okay.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. But assuming there were trees or there are trees planted that grow to a certain size that meets the regulation or the regulated tree criteria, then the LPP would apply.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you through the chair, yes.
Any further questions? Councillor David.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just by way of background to this, Lot 1 is owned in freehold by Royal Perth Golf Club, but I understand the golf course itself sits on Crown Reserve land. Can anyone tell me the history of how this little parcel came to be in private hands?
I'm going to start with Ms Mullen, but it's possible that one might have to be taken on... Oh, Ms Ampremo?
We'll take it on notice.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.3, Local Planning Policy 3.2, Tree Retention Effectiveness Report. This report presents details of the effectiveness of Local Planning Policy 3.2, Tree Retention, since its adoption at the 26th of August 2025 Ordinary Council meeting, as required by resolution of Council.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor David?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the report under the heading Compliance, Prosecutions and State Administrative Tribunal, you note that there is a case that is pending, scheduled for 14th of August. Did that take place and what was the outcome?
Ms Mullen, should I send that your way?
Thank you, through the chair. The matter was actually adjourned at the Magistrates Court to a date in October 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor David?
Can you tell me the reason for that adjournment?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. It was in relation to the availability of the parties to the case and legal advice the availability of the legal advisors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor David?
Thank you. On the same topic, you outline case 3 and case 4 in the report. Are either of those in relation to the former tree at 41 South Terrace, Como?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. All matters before the court are confidential, so I'm not able to provide that information. Thank you.
Councillor David?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have had at least one successful prosecution noted in the report, a fine imposed consisting of $5,000. Why hasn't the outcome of these prosecutions been publicised by the city? That would surely put people on notice as to the real consequences of tree removal.
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. It was a decision made by the city not to publicise the outcome of court cases, which I think is a standard procedure across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Any further? Yes, Councillor Russell.
Yes, thank you. So under the subdivision applications commentary by the city states, new lots are therefore created which cannot be reasonably developed without removal of regulated trees, inconsistent with the objectives of this policy, that is the South Perth policy. So as the state government's own R Code's objective states, to support tree retention and re-establishment of the urban tree canopy with the aim of reducing the impact of heat island effect, then likewise to our policy, is there an inconsistency with regard to tree retention objectives of the state government's R codes and the state government's subdivision methodology?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. That could be considered to be as such, yes. Thank you.
So by extension, is it fair to say, therefore, that the state government's own planning laws and processes are inconsistent with retaining and improving the urban forest?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not sure it's for an officer to provide opinion of that. What I would say is that in creating subdivisions, what the WAPC is achieving is the development potential, or facilitating the development potential of particular sites, to seek, and this is obviously my opinion, to seek the retention of trees on those particular lots that are created via the subdivision would significantly reduce the development potential of the sites, which would then be in conflict with the residential zoning of the site. So I think it would be difficult to retain trees in some instances and then still achieve the development potential of sites in the zoning.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillors, any further questions for the administration on this item this evening? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note in the report at the end it's got references potential actions, and I've just lost it. And the first one is a full review of the policy, and the second one is to look at an exemptions-based policy. I am aware that Walga has just updated its model policy, and it is now an exemptions-based policy. So would that satisfy the second option, and what was the city anticipating in terms of a full review under the first option?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. I think a full review of LPP 3.2, I suppose they're not sort of mutually exclusive. There is the ability to consider the review of LPP 3.2 and its applicability in terms of the report that's been presented to Council this month, to see whether it is effective. And then for Council to consider an exemptions-based policy and see whether that aligns with the aims of Council and how they've seen LPP 3.2 operate.
So, thank you, Mr Mayor. On that basis, given the Walga policy model is now an exemptions policy, that might be satisfying the second option.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you. Yes, it may.
Thank you. I did have a further question, if possible.
Please proceed.
Keep moving. Does the city consider that it would be appropriate for an updated tree policy to include replacement planting requirements that take into account factors such as species, canopy size, maturity and environmental value when determining replacements for approved tree removals? And that sort of follows on from the deputation tonight.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. Yes, that can certainly be a consideration in a new policy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Ms Mullen. I did have a further question. I note that in the potential actions it refers to resourcing and recruitment of an in-house arborist, and I know that we have other needs for an in-house arborist in terms of the shot hole borer and ongoing tree issues, and I was just wondering what the administration's views were on progressing with that. I think earlier in the report it suggests that that may be difficult to achieve, but is there opportunity for an in-house arborist or some other contract type position that would fulfil that, and what is the city's implications in that, or intentions in that matter?
I might send that one to Ms Amprimo simply because it's got budget implications, but Ms Amprimo?
So the city recognises the need to have access to that kind of skill, whether we do it through direct employment or whether we do that through a contracted arrangement or whether we look to upskill existing officers, really depends on what is available out there in the marketplace and the most cost-effective way to do that. So we look at all of those options and seek to do it in a cost-effective way that meets the needs of the operation.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillors, any further questions on this item this evening? Councillor David.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Getting back to the list of potential actions, one of them is consider issuing infringements for minor tree damaging activity offences. It's my understanding that infringements are limited to the sum of $500. Is this correct?
Is that Ms Mullen or Ms Shaw? Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. Just checking. Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, it's stated in the report that the city sought advice from the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, DPIRD, who advised that there is no formally adopted state weed register, but I wonder if they were aware of their own Western Australian organism list, WAOL, which is a searchable database providing the legal status of plants, animals and microorganisms under the Biosecurity and Agricultural Management Act 2007, and whether that stands in for the weed register.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. So the policy specifically references a state weed register. So the inquiries that the city made with the department specifically referenced that particular document that the city was seeking to see whether it was actually adopted. So the city has not inquired of any further documents that may be or resources that may be available. The inquiry only related to a state weed register. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. And I'll give you one more, Councillor David, but just a gentle reminder to all councillors that we can also ask questions offline. We don't have to just ask them either at the council agenda briefing, but I've got to try and be consistent with everyone, so I'll give you a total of 7, but yeah, after that, maybe offline.
Actually, I'm just looking at my notes and I may, in fact, have reached the end. Oh, yes. Well, my question was that our tree retention policy obviously comes from Walga's model, and they put the words in state weed register. So has Walga been consulted to see what they meant when they used those words?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. No, the city went directly to the source. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note in the updated Walga model that it's seeking to address that issue of the weed register, and it requires the city to specify a weed list or refer to another document. Has the city got any views on the availability or the opportunity to identify a weed list?
Ms Lowe? Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, we don't have a particular weed list. We have, for our own operations, we have plants that we prefer to plant rather than these ones are specifically prohibited.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo.
So,
Councillor Lees.
So I suppose that would mean that the city would have to source a list or potentially build its own list based on other sources.
Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, that's correct.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question follows on from Councillor Lee's question just with regard to obtaining an arborist or person specialising in weeds. For the budget for the current year, did we allocate additional funds specifically for tree initiatives and also arborists? So I'm just wondering if we've got sufficient budget in order to undertake these initiatives, which are important initiatives.
Who should I send that to, folks? Ms Lowe?
We haven't allocated the specific budget for an arborist, but whenever we need to, we use our operational budget for those ones.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This report's outlined, I guess, a few of the unforeseen consequences and implementation, I guess, hurdles since adoption of this policy, including, I believe it was 14K or thereabouts worth of prosecution costs. Does the city have an estimate of the further prosecution costs for cases 2, 3 and 4, which are listed on page 34 of the agenda?
Ms Mullen, should I send that your way?
Thank you, through the chair. I'll take that question on notice. We will be able to provide an indication of the costs to date, but obviously not the completed costs.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Any further questions, Councillor D'Souza?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Ms Mullen. Further question, in terms of the potential actions, including potentially a new arborist, is the city able to provide those costs to council for consideration as well, please?
I think it'll depend on the options that Ms Amprimo were talking about before, but Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, could I just ask Councillor D'Souza to clarify the question, because the cost, if we're using contracted services, will be linked to the amount that we require to use an arborist, and if we employ one full-time, then they may be used partially for that arborist work and partially for other parts of the operation. So I don't know whether Councillor D'Souza wants to clarify his question with that respect.
Councillor D'Souza?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Ms Amprimo. Effectively, what would be the sort of, I guess, marginal cost in terms of the implementation of this specific policy in terms of resourcing and staffing?
Ms Ampremo.
Do you have the answer?
I could understand if you wanted to take that one on notice, or Ms Shaw.
Yeah, we'll take that on notice. The cost is likely to be variable, but we can give you an indication.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Any further questions, Councillor D'Souza?
That's all. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. Councillor Lees, and I think you're up to that 6, it'll be 7 now, so I'll give you one more.
Number 6, but that's okay.
All right, you're being kind.
I note in the council's report, or the city's report, that 92 trees have been retained on private property as part of development approval since this was adopted. And I know that the city has a way of assessing the value of trees, and I'm not suggesting that you would do that for 92 trees, but can you give a sort of rough indication of the sort of value, community value, that we are retaining, but in relation to the costs of the implementation?
I'll send that to Ms Ampremo, but once again, I'd understand if Ms Ampremo took it on notice.
Look, we haven't done that assessment, and I think to go away and redo that assessment, I'm not sure whether that's valuable.
No, I wasn't suggesting that you should go, but I mean, average value of a tree would be what, $50,000 up in terms of community.
All right, I'll jump in here and just remind everyone that this isn't the forum to be making statements, but Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So on private property, we'd be using Helliwell method, but the reason that we aren't able to actually work out what that value would be is because to do that assessment, we would need to have a look at the size of the tree, the useful life expectancy, and then go through the process of calculating that to determine what the financial value of that tree would have otherwise been. When we're assessing the development applications, we're assessing against the criteria contained within the policy on whether it's a regulated tree or not, and the criteria for it to be removed. So we wouldn't be able to speculate and say each tree would otherwise likely be, say, $50,000, because there are huge variances in terms of the quality and assessment of those trees that we've reviewed. As the CEO also pointed out, we wouldn't be able to retrospectively go back and look at that because we've already undertaken the assessment, and where they've had approval to remove, we can't go back and calculate the value.
No, that's okay. I wasn't...
Thank you, Ms Shaw.
I just think that it goes to the effectiveness of the LPP and the benefit to the community.
All right.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? No. And thank you all. I do appreciate this item has a high degree of public interest. Next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.4, proposed group dwellings, lot 296, number 22 Barker Avenue, Como. The purpose of this report is to consider the application for development approval for 3 group dwellings on lot 296, number 22 Barker Avenue, Como. The item is referred to Council as the proposed development is an application which proposes tree damaging activity to a regulated tree in accordance with 7.2c of the Local Planning Policy 3.2 tree retention. For the reasons outlined in the report, it's recommended that the application be approved with conditions.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any questions for the City Administration on this item this evening? Councillor Russell.
Thank you. The proposed development relies upon access to the rear right-of-way. So when I inspect the intramaps, it suggests that this laneway is Crown land. And it also further says that it's up for possible future partial closure under Policy 27. So my question is, what exactly is that policy? And is it still valid? And if so, what impacts does it have on this proposal?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd take that on notice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further on, with regard to the right-of-way, as the city's own policy P350.14 states, the policy does not apply to any right-of-way held in freehold by the Crown, which suggests to me that the city recognises there's a separate legal status where Crown right-of-way ownership is involved. Hence, my question is, therefore, is it necessary for necessary for the applicant to demonstrate lawful vehicular access to the right-of-way?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. In making any application for development approval or, in fact, subdivision, the applicant does have to demonstrate that they have a legal right to access a right-of-way. Thank you.
I understand there's been no subdivision on this property yet.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. The subdivision is currently on hold, but a subdivision has been lodged. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Russell.
I'm looking at the crossovers to the rear, or the rear lots to the laneway. Do they need 45-degree vision truncations?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. My understanding is they wouldn't, because it is a right-of-way, but I will take that on notice and provide further information.
Okay, thank you. I believe this question may have been preempted by a deputation. So, again, with reference to policy 3.2, tree retention, under development applications, it does state that tree damaging activity to a regulated tree may be considered if the information and or technical reports are provided to demonstrate the redesign of the development to accommodate the regulated tree is unfeasible, with the emphasis on unfeasible. So has the applicant demonstrated sufficiently to the city to reach this opinion that unfeasible is applicable in the case of the Jarrah tree alone?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. As explained within the report, yes, the city has reached that conclusion. Thank you.
Just a following question. Is it the intent of the R codes, our local planning scheme 7, our local planning strategy, or even indeed the Perth and Peel 3.5 million vision, to maximise dwelling yield per property, or is it to optimise dwelling yield when considering other elements such as heritage, flooding, bushfire, livable neighbourhoods, and yes, tree retention?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. All matters, as referenced by Councillor Russell, are to be taken into consideration in the assessment of a development application. However, as in accordance with the policy, and we look at the zoning that's applied to this site through the local planning scheme and R30 density, what the city is considering is whether there is an ability to develop at that density that is proposed, and do the registered regulated trees on the site actually preclude that density being achieved. So in answer to the question, yes, those matters are to be taken into consideration, but it's a balancing of all those elements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. I can give you one more, Councillor Russell, but I'll have to be fair to everyone after that. So,
Happy to ask.
and again, a reminder to all elected members.
So, looking at the area of the Jarrah tree's notional root zone, it's quite large. Is it the city's opinion, therefore, that the development of this site into 3 lots would indeed be unfeasible if the Jarrah tree alone was retained? And is it therefore the city's opinion that development of this site into 2 lots would be unfeasible if the Jarrah tree is retained?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the Chair. When assessing a development application submitted to the city, we have to consider the development as proposed. So it wouldn't be for the city to suggest 2 group dwellings in an instance such as this, because the applicant has applied for 3. Likewise, the city doesn't propose design options for the applicant, so the city is considering the 3. In answer to the question, obviously the root zone indicated would preclude the construction of 3 group dwellings on the site, because it is quite extensive. In asking, could two be developed? If the Jarrah was retained, it would be a possibility, but that's not what's being considered by Council this month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillors, any further questions on this item for the City Administration this evening? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So moving on from a further question on the notional root zone. So my understanding is it's a very indicative guide only. It's a circle drawn up from the base of the tree. And we know that root growth is often opportunistic and influenced by site conditions. So can the city advise whether any exploratory investigations such as root mapping, trenching or other arboricultural assessments were undertaken to determine the actual root extent in this instance?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, the Chair. I'm not aware of those investigations, but the information supplied has been supplied by a qualified arborist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor Lees.
I note Ms Mullen's advice in relation to looking at the proposal before us, but I feel like that makes it really difficult to address whether development on the site is unfeasible if we're only looking at what the applicant has put to us. And I just wonder, did the applicant provide any alternative options as justification? Was there any alternative building footprints, floor levels, foundations, excavation strategies shown to indicate that the development was unfeasible for three units there in some other form?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. Since the adoption of the policy, the approach by officers is when an application is submitted and we are aware that regulated trees are on site, the initial conversations with applicants highlight the trees that the city would be seeking to retain, and also the information that would be required from an applicant in order to justify removal of the trees. So in a case such as this, the conversation would have been had with the applicant as whether it was possible to redesign the group dwellings in any way to retain the trees, and justification would have already also been provided. So we are considering 3 group dwellings, but the conversation has already been had with the applicant before it reaches this stage as to whether it's possible to redesign. So it's not for the city to redesign for the applicant, but the conversation has been had with the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So there's no discussion about reducing the building footprint or reducing the size, the floor area of the dwelling at all?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, that is always a conversation with applicants as to whether there can be a redesign to accommodate the trees, and that would have taken place in this instance as well.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor Lees.
I do have one further question. I note that an adjoining landowner objected to a non-compliant boundary wall to the east, and the city has advised that the applicant subsequently reduced the height of the wall by 30 centimetres. So can the city confirm that the wall is now compliant, and has the adjoining landowner been contacted to see whether this has resolved their concerns?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you. It is now considered to be compliant. It's not usual for the neighbour to be, or the person who's made a submission to be contacted, because it's considered that the amendment actually addresses the concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillors, any further questions on this item this evening? Councillor David.
Just to clarify information which I suspect you've already communicated to Councillor Russell, but is it correct that there is no mandate or requirement to develop a property to the fullest extent allowed by the zoning?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. No, that's correct. An applicant could purchase this lot and build one house if they wish to do so.
Thank you very much. My next question is, in general, that if a development application is refused, what are the steps? What are the next steps that a applicant could take?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. The applicant can seek a review of that decision with the State Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you very much. And another question about the Jarrah tree, and we've heard information tonight that it's a tree of a type that provides food and habitat for black cockatoos. Does that mean that some special permission is required to remove it?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. My understanding is that no, a single tree would not require consent.
Thank you very much. And this question harks back to a question I asked about the last item, which is that Walga obviously drafted the local planning policy, which we've adopted as local planning policy 3.2, and included the term unfeasible. Has inquiry been made of Walga as to what their thinking was when they wrote that?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you through the chair. No, it hasn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.5, proposed group dwellings, Lot 5, number 46, Thelma Street, Como. The purpose of this report is to consider an application for development approval for 4 group dwellings and tree damaging activity on Lot 5, number 46, Thelma Street, Como. The item is referred to Council as the proposed development is an application which proposes tree damaging activities to a regulated tree in accordance with 7.2c of the Local Planning Policy 3.2 tree retention. For the reasons outlined in the report, it's recommended that the application be approved subject to conditions.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any questions on this item this evening? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In reading the arborist report, it would appear that the arborist has based his determination on the building footprint that was before him, with tree retention considered afterwards, because he says things like all existing trees on the site have been assessed for retention based on species, health, structural condition and location relative to the development footprint. The removal of existing trees is considered necessary to facilitate the group dwelling development. So that's not, my belief is that that's not the intent of the LPP. And is the city aware whether any alternative design outcomes were put or considered by the arborist or the applicant that may have facilitated tree retention?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you to the chair. I'm unable to comment in relation to the instruction that the applicant provided to the arborist in terms of undertaking the assessment. As can be seen in the report, officers did discuss a proposed whether the lot 4 may be redesigned in order to retain the tree. So again, there were discussions in relation to that on this application.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillors, any further questions on this one? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note that the 2-storey unit 4 to the rear proposes a non-compliant northern setback of 1.5 metres rather than the required 3 metres. And from aerial maps, it looks to me like the adjoining development to the west appears to have a similar setback encroachment. So has the city, or can the city advise if it's looked at this and the cumulative effect of both developments on the property to the north and whether it considers that impact acceptable?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you to the chair. Yes, that would have been considered and it is considered acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillors, any further questions for the administration on this item this evening? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. Next item, please, Ms Ampremo. Oh, wait, I think Councillor Lees had another question right on the buzzer there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just noted that in the report, it suggests that the Unit 4 30 square metre open space was required and only 19.7 square metres was provided. Can you explain to me why Unit 4 was required to have more open space than 2 and 3?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you through the chair. That would be in relation to the size of the dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. Councillor Lees? No? All right, last chance for anyone else on this item? No. Next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.6, response to notice of motion, review of parking management systems and technologies. This report presents the response to a notice of motion from Mayor Greg Milner titled Review of Parking Management Systems and Technologies. It provides details on systems available to assist with parking management throughout the City of South Perth.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor D'Souza?
No, Mr Mayor.
All right, in that case, next item, please, Ms Ampremo.
Item 10.4.1, City of South Perth Communications Agreement. This report presents the draft City of South Perth Communications Agreement and recommends Council adopt the agreement.
Councillors, any questions for the City Administration on this item this evening? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I found the state government's communication agreement very difficult to read, typically bureaucratic. So I'm just wondering if Division 3, Clause 12, subsection 6, covers situations where that discusses a request for information and what it may be in relation to. Does that cover where a ratepayer is or residents unsatisfied with an operational response and they ask the council member to follow up on that? Because it's very wordy, and I'm assuming it could be correspondence received by the council member or committee member, or something about the broad public concern, but I'm not entirely sure.
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm assuming that you're referring to an instance where a ratepayer is not satisfied with a response that's been received directly from an elected member.
Sorry, if a ratepayer has put in a request to the city administration and they've asked us to look into it further or talk to the city further about it.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. They can make a complaint directly to the CEO, and there's an internal process that we can then follow in terms of addressing that complaint. We have an employee code of conduct and a customer service charter which sets out standards in terms of our response times and where a review can be made by the CEO as to the advice that's been provided, whereas this communications agreement is more to do with the council member and committee members and how they liaise with the city.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Lees.
Yeah, my understanding of our role in part is to act as a conduit between the city and the ratepayers and residents, and where we get inquiries in relation to some matter that's been raised with the city, we can follow up with the city again, but you're saying we can't.
Ms Shaw.
Sorry, are you referring to the councillor request system? So if you were requesting a follow-up on an inquiry, that could be made via the councillor request system, which has been outlined within the communications agreement, and the draft agreement also provides the timeframes to which the city would provide a response.
So that is covered, that sort of a request is covered under that list?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it is. There's a section highlighted in yellow further in the document that talks about the councillor requests.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Any further questions, Councillor Lees?
Yeah, it talks about requests for information being put to the Office of the CEO or Governance. So I'm just clarifying, are we talking about another change to the system, or are we going to be continuing with the councillor request system?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I might take the question on notice and just find the relevant sections for you, and I can provide you that information.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Lees.
Mr Mayor, sorry, I had another question. Is it possible, as part of this communications agreement or some other document, to address the need for a register of requests so that elected members can refer back to them?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the agreement has been drafted generally consistent with the draft order from the state government that doesn't provide any information in terms of a register that's available to track requests. However, that is something that we can look at administratively as to how we convey to elected members where their request is.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Lees? All right. Councillors, any further questions about this item? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. I guess I'll ask one, and I think I already know the answer, but Ms. Shaw, do we have much choice about having to implement something like this? I get the impression that the state government is ordering that we have something like this, albeit, some discretion as to what the ultimate form is.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the relevant sections of the 2023 Amendment Act are pending finalisation. So this is a draft order from the state government, but if and when that does come into effect, each local government will be required to have the communications agreement that's consistent with that draft order.
Thank you. Any final questions on this item, councillors? No. Next item, please, Ms Amprema.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.2, City of South Perth submission, statutory review, CAT Act 2011. This report presents the City of South Perth submission on the statutory review of the CAT Act for Council's endorsement.
Thank you, Ms Amprema. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thanks.
Next item, please, Ms Amprema.
Item 10.4.3, monthly financials, July 2026, to present to Council the financial statements for July 2026.
Thank you, Ms Amprema. Councillors, any questions? Councillor D'Souza?
None.
Councillor Denton?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It may just be my lack of understanding, but if we look at page 86 of 94, it sets out a table with some figures, or two tables with some figures. 10.4.3. I presume this is showing what the difference is, whether you're either over or below budget in relation to what was expected. So capital revenue, why was it unfavourable? It appears to be less than the budget.
Should I send that to Ms Amprema or Ms Shaw? Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You're correct. It's just stating where there's a difference between what was budgeted and what the spending was. So in terms of the capital revenue, it's indicating that there was the variance there of 4,354. Is that what you were seeking?
Yes. So 23,646 versus 28. Why is it unfavourable?
Ms Amprema?
I'm laughing because I think I share Councillor Denton's challenge with this aspect of how we report. Perhaps we will have a one-on-one with financials as to how we present these reports, so that you've got some more understanding, because although we report it as unfavourable and favourable, it's counterintuitive in some aspects. But that's,
I was going to suggest that would be very helpful, and maybe Councillor David would like to join us as well. I don't know, but a budget briefing would be very helpful. Thank you.
Quite happy to go through that with you separately.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Any further questions on this item, councillors? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thanks.
No. Next item, please, Ms Amprema.
Item 10.4.4, listing of payments July 2026. This report presents to Council the list of accounts paid under delegated authority between 1 July 2026 and 31 July 2026, and purchase card, credit card and fleet card transactions included in the total monthly balance settled between 1 July 2026 and 31 July 2026.
Thank you, Ms Amprema. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor D'Souza?
No.
In that case, thank you. In that case, final item, Ms Amprema.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.5, Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee. This report seeks the appointment of Chief Executive Officer Evaluation Committee for the period 25th of August 2026 to 16 October 2027.
Thank you, Ms Amprema. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor D'Souza?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, we move on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. That's nil for this evening. Item 15 is when we close the meeting to the public, and there was an indication that some councillors had some questions about the confidential attachment on item 10.1.2. So at this stage, I'll have to bid those in the public gallery good night. We're going to have to close the doors, I'm afraid, but thank you for your attendance this evening. And governance, if we can go offline while... So, governance, if you can let us know when we're back online. And Mr. Ball, would you be kind enough to open up the doors again? All right, so for those who are still listening online, we've just come out of confidential session. That was item 15. We now move to item 16, which is closure. So before I close tonight's meeting, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. I declare the meeting closed at 7:35 p.m. Thank you all and good night.